Hi, I'm Melissa Nicholas, and I'm going to be talking to you about 5 titles from Hachette. First up is Burial Rites by Hannah Kent. It's a September 2013 Little Brown hardcover. It's a brilliant literary debut inspired by a true story, the final days of a young woman accused of murder in Iceland in 1829. Set against Iceland's stark landscape, Hannah Kent brings to the vivid life the story of Agnes, who, charged with the brutal murder of her former master, is sent to an isolated farm to await execution. Horrified at the prospect of housing a convicted murderer, the family at first avoids Agnes. Only Toti, a priest Agnes has mysteriously chosen to be her spiritual guardian, seeks to understand her. But as Agnes's death looms, the farmer's wife and their daughters learn there is another side to the sensational story they've heard. Riveting and rich with lyricism, Burial Rites evokes a dramatic existence in a distant time and place, and asks the question, how can one woman hope to endure when her life depends on the stories told by others? There is so much to discuss in this book that your book club might actually discuss this book. A little bit about the author. Hannah Kent, a 27-year-old Australian writer, spent a year in Iceland, where she first heard the story of Agnes Magnusdóttir. Kent became obsessed with Agnes and describes Burial Rites as her efforts to exorcise Agnes from her subconscious. One of my very favorite authors, Geraldine Brooks, read Burial Rites early on and said this: "Here is an original new voice with a deep and lovely grasp of language and story. Hannah Kent's first novel, Burial Rites, is an accomplished gem, its prose as crisp and sparkling as its northern setting." Kirkus Reviews gave it a starred review. Madeline Miller, author of The Song of Achilles, also loved it, as have many other booksellers. One of my book clubs, I'm in 3, got an early read of this, and we had a rollicking, sober time discussing a wide range of topics, including literacy, reading, gender roles, spirituality, faith, Icelandic culture, adultery, death penalty, not necessarily in that order, and parallels to today. Second up is The Outcast by Kathleen Kent. I know you might be getting suspicious that I'm only going to be discussing authors with the last name Kent, but I assure you the third author will have a different surname. This is an October 2013 Little Brown hardcover. A taut, thrilling adventure story about buried treasure, a manhunt, and a woman determined to make a new life for herself in the Old West. It's the 19th century on the Gulf Coast, a time of opportunity and lawlessness. After escaping the Texas brothel, where she'd been a virtual prisoner, Lucinda Carter heads for the Middle Bayou to meet her lover, who has a plan to make them both rich, chasing rumors of a pirate's buried treasure. Meanwhile, Nate Cannon, a young Texas policeman with a pure heart and a strong sense of justice, is on the hunt for a ruthless killer named McGill, who has claimed the lives of men, women, and even children across the frontier. Who, if anyone, will survive when their paths finally cross? As Lucinda and Nate's stories converge, guns are drawn, debts are paid, and Kathleen Kent delivers an unforgettable portrait of a woman who will stop at nothing to make a new life for herself. Why you may already know this best-selling author. Kathleen Kent's debut, The Heretic's Daughter, spent 4 weeks on the New York Times extended bestseller list and went to print 4 times. The paperback edition also appeared on the extended bestseller list, with 6 printings altogether, so there are 250,000 copies spanning the globe. Kathleen is beloved by reading groups and by mom. Kent has won the hearts of reading groups, schools, and historical societies with her informative talks and personal outreach. Her richly historical and romantic stories are widely appealing to book groups. Connect at her website to let Kathleen know you are reading the book, and you can invite Kathleen to your reading group. You will not be sorry. Schroeder by Amity Gage was published by 12. It's available now in hardcover and in early 2014 in trade paperback. Schroeder is a lyrical and deeply affecting novel recounting the 7 days a father spends on the road with his daughter after kidnapping her during a parental visit. Attending a New England summer camp, young Eric Schroeder, a first-generation East German immigrant, adopts the last name Kennedy to more easily fit in, a fateful white lie that will set him on an improbable and ultimately tragic course. Schroeder relates the story of Eric's urgent escape years later to Lake Champlain, Vermont, with his 6-year-old daughter Meadow, in an attempt to outrun the authorities amid a heated custody battle with his wife, who will soon discover that her husband is not who he says he is. From a correctional facility, Eric surveys the course of his life to understand and maybe even explain his behavior. The painful separation from his mother in childhood, a harrowing escape to America with his taciturn father, a romance that withered under a shadow of lies, and his proudest moments and greatest regrets as a flawed but loving father. Alternately lovesick and ecstatic, Amity Gage's deftly imagined novel offers a profound meditation on history and fatherhood, and the many identities we take on in our lives, those we are born with and those we construct for ourselves. Amity Gage is an acclaimed author and was named to the 5 under 35 Outstanding Emerging Novelists by the National Book Foundation. She's a graduate of the Iowa Writers Workshop and the recipient of a Fulbright Fellowship and a MacDowell Colony Fellowship. Her two previous novels have earned rapturous reviews. A quick translation, she's smart. This is a book to talk about. Call me if you disagree. I'll buy you lunch. A newsworthy subject dealt with in a literary and heartfelt manner that makes Schroeder ripe for discussions and readers and book clubs. Of course, I prefer you to call me and tell me you loved it and are just crackling to talk about it. The New York Times gave it a rave review, as well as Good Housekeeping, Reader's Digest, O Magazine, and about 1 billion others. My publishing book group read it and discussed themes of identity, immigrant experience and assimilation, parent-child relationships, forgiveness, lying and its consequences, custodial arrangements and disagreements, marital values, mental illness. Amity has resources on her website, and this will have the conversation flowing. This Part Was True by Deborah McKinley is an early 2014 Grand Central Publishing hardcover. The Bridges of Madison County meet Sleepless in Seattle. It's a lonely British woman's letter to a successful American author that sparks a relationship that changes both their lives. When Eve Petworth writes to Jackson Cooper to praise a scene in one of his books, they discover a mutual love of cookery and food. They could write to me, too. Anyway, their friendship blossoms against the backdrop of Jackson's colorful but ultimately unsatisfying love life and Eve's tense relationship with her soon-to-be married daughter. As each of them offers, from behind the veils of semi-anonymity and distance, wise and increasingly affectionate counsel to one another, they both begin to confront their problems and plan a celebratory meeting in Paris, a meeting Eve fears will never happen. So if your book club loved One Day and the Guernsey Literary Potato Peel Society, then I say no more. Put this on your list for the new year. That's it. A little about Deborah. She's published 6 nonfiction titles in the UK, and her books have been translated into numerous languages. Her work has appeared in British Vogue, Cosmopolitan, Esquire, and she lives in southwest England. Last up is Eloise by Judy Finnegan, a September 2013 trade paperback. Compulsively readable and incredibly haunting, Eloise is the London Times best-selling debut novel from broadcaster, journalist, and book club champion Judy Finnegan. Judy Finnegan is a household name in the UK and a daytime television host. Through the Richard and Judy Book Club, she has championed books and readers for many years. Recently, Judy retired from TV, although her husband, the aforementioned Richard, continues on, although not on Downton Abbey, as far as I can tell. Anyway, Judy retired and got down to business writing a novel. Her new book, Eloise, is a spooky thriller about a middle-aged woman whose best friend dies from breast cancer tragically young. And it was inspired by the death of Judy's friend, Karen Keating, who lost her battle against the disease at the age of 41 in 2004. When you read the book, you find that Eloise was a daughter, a wife, a mother, loved by her best friend, but what secrets did Eloise take to her grave? Book clubs can chew on many topics. What if the ghost of your best friend came back to haunt you, and everyone else thought you were insane? Eloise is compulsively readable and a haunting novel about the depth of friendship through distance and time, of the fragility of relationships and the love that binds us together. This is a novel that is at once accessible and deeply moving for the fans of Ellen Hildenbrand, Jennifer Weiner, and Anne Rivers Siddons. Confess that I have a soft spot for Prince Harry, and that is why my last few books are written by the Brits. So in England, you should know that this was a Sunday Times bestseller, as well as the fastest-selling fiction debut in hardcover of 2012. Again, coming to the States this September. Lastly, I'll say that the author Dorothy Koomson, who you may not know but you should look up because her books are great as well, has said highly readable, incredibly moving in parts, and wonderfully echoes Daphne du Maurier. Eloise had me turning pages late into the night. So, thank you on behalf of Hachette to Carol and the gang at bookreporter.com. Happy reading and discussing. Thank you.